Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast, episode number 310. Today, we'll talk about the leader's role in hazard prevention. But before we get going, if you get anything from this, please like, share, comment, send to fellow safety professionals. My goal is that safety professionals are better than me. So I'm doing everything I can to present lessons learned. Some of them were really easy and not very hard. Others were super painful. But I want everybody to profit from my pain to be better than I was as a safety professional. As a young safety professional, I didn't have any help, any resources, and I literally struggled. I made it work. And of course, I also made some really dumb mistakes along the way. So let's go ahead and get started. Today's topic, we'll talk just a few seconds about the leader's role in hazard prevention. And this goes back to a little talk I had probably 10 or 15 years ago with the supervisor. And the supervisor said, "Well, what am I supposed to do? I'm just kind of in charge of this equipment, in charge of these people." I'm like, "So, you know, as a supervisor, of course, you obviously are in charge of the people. You're in charge of the equipment. So you want to do everything you can in a proactive sense to not injure people." So we talked obviously about training. We talked about that stuff then. And of course, he really got that because that kind of makes money sense. But when you get down to the softer skills, uh, really a lot of leaders really struggle with this. That somebody brings forward a, "I have found a hazard." They then struggle with, "What do I do next?" A lot of times it's, "Yeah, but we've had that for 30 years." It's people just know they're going to be careful. They're going to, and that has worked, many times. It doesn't mean that it works always. There's still a lot of people who get hurt. There's also a lot of people that when they're first trained, they're not really trained well, either, because they're trained by somebody who just kind of does a good job, and that's awesome. Of course, that's a great starting point, but that's not always the whole picture, of course, in this thing. But let's get back to the leader's role then. You're there for time, money, effort. You're following up when there's a hazard, and when the workplace is being changed, you're thinking about it from a proactive standpoint. How do I reduce hazards? How do I reduce these things out there? Because the company will always say, "Oh, it's a fixed site. It's this, but there's a lot of times where they will bring in a new piece of equipment, move things around. They'll try and do everything they can to optimize production. And that's awesome and great. But at the same time, let's try to optimize the safety of the folks out there too then. So the leader, of course, should be standing up and saying, as we do this, we need to factor in the safety aspect too. You know? And I know there's a lot of people who say, "Oh, as the safety professional, you're supposed to weigh in on design and drawings and all the rest." And that's ideal world. So luckily, I've worked at a lot of great places, and they wanted to hear my ideas. Some of my ideas were not accepted. They just thought it was not realistic what I was asking for. Um, but there's a lot of places when I talk to safety professionals that they have zero input. Somebody else will make every single decision. You're stuck with what you're stuck with. You're going to tackle multiple sites. So it's really hard to be proactive. A lot of times they end up just putting out fires. So back to the leader's role. Again, you're being as proactive as you possibly can. And I know many times I'm preaching to the choir when we sit down and talk about these things, but we as safety professionals should talk to the leaders too. There's a lot of times where they don't really understand their role. A lot of times a leader was brought up because they're really good at running something and making widget A, and it doesn't mean that they're not a good person. They just don't know about safety. We need to help them. We need to talk to them. We need to engage with them. So don't think of yourself as, "I am only the safety person." You are helping them to do everything they can because many times they just don't know. Or the company says, "I really like your business sense, but they weren't really interviewed for, let's look at your safety record out there. Let's look at, have you had anybody injured or hurt? Have you had any chemical spills? So there's a lot of times that they don't factor in everything that, of course, that we safety folks think ought to be factored in as you kind of step up that ladder. So with that, let's go ahead there and wrap it up. I know I only covered just a very few of these then, but one of my goals is that when we speak, it's short, actionable steps. I'm not going to talk for an hour and a half, and because many of us are driving in the car. People are taking notes, like, okay, I got like a complete plan, and I gotta. That's just not realistic out there. Short, actionable steps. And so, with that, let's wrap it up. Thank you for joining me. My name is Dr. David Ayers. Have a safe day.